unleashing female power.
Being a disruptor.
I'm always constantly telling the truth.
I love
art. That's all her life.
She's alive and female.
Being a woman, what it meant.
Prove him wrong.
Girls run the world.
We're rocking the place.
Welcome to the Art Pod. I'm your host, Carolina, and I'll be your guide through this Pandora's box. Strap yourselves in for a journey through the art world where we bring you candid conversations, untold stories, uncover industry secrets, and celebrate the women who are shaping its future. Because in the Art Pod, the spotlight is always on the girls. Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Art Pod. My guest today is Fola Adenugba. Yes. Welcome.
Thank you.
So a little bit about Fola. She is a Nigerian arts professional who has lived in the United Kingdom, Switzerland, and the United States. As the founder of ISE-DA, she leads business development, strategic partnerships, and provides art advisory services for clients. Fola graduated with an MA in art business from Sotheby's Institute of Art. She completed her Bachelor of Business Administration with a concentration in strategy consulting at Emory University Business School, completing a second major in art history at Emory's College of Arts and Sciences. Fola has worked in consulting, interned at art institutions including the High Museum of Art, the National Gallery of Art in DC, and worked at James Cohen Gallery and Meta's Open Arts. Fola was selected for Forbes' 30 Under 30 list in Art and Style in 2024. Fola served on the approval board and as a curator for Art on the Avenue, having her co-curated exhibition featured on NBC New York. She has moderated cross-national panels about global Black art and was a selected speaker for panels about Black art during Miami Art Week in 2021. As a cultural partner for Carnegie Hall's Afrofuturism Festival, Fola was featured in PBS's documentary covering the rise of Afrofuturism. She has guest lectured at the Rhode Island School of Design and Sotheby's Institute of Art. So we have a lot to get into, yes. But let's begin with the fact that you're the founder and art advisor at ISE-DA.
Yes.
I love the name.
Thank you.
Can you tell us a little bit about what it means and why you picked it?
Yes. So the focus and mission of ISE-DA, we say we focus on the cultural stewardship of Black contemporary art. And when I was thinking about this business that I wanted to build, I was speaking with people I'm close to, so family and friends, to decide, what should I call it? And it was suggested that I pick a Yoruba name as someone who is Yoruba. And that's an ethnic group in Nigeria. So I spoke to my parents who are fluent in Yoruba, my aunts and uncles who are fluent. And I was asking them, what does maybe art mean in Yoruba? What does creativity mean in Yoruba? And so we were talking back and forth and discussing what would be an appropriate name for this. And ISE-DA was what we selected. And it can mean different but similar things depending on context. So it can mean good work. It can mean creation. It can mean origin. And I think it's something that is really core to what ISE-DA is about. And especially because Yoruba is a language that's not even just spoken in Nigeria, but in other countries across the diaspora. And when you look at the diaspora, a lot of people still practice the traditional Yoruba religions and things like that. So I think it's a word and a concept that focuses on what we want, which is connecting the diaspora, supporting and preserving cultural production of the diaspora. And I think calling it ISE-DA starts it off with the language. So it just fit in what we were trying to do.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's almost melodic when you say it. Can you tell us a little bit about ISE-DA and kind of the mission behind it, what you do?
Mm-hmm. So I first thought of ISE-DA in 2018. I was still working as an analyst at Black & Veatch. And I was thinking, okay, I want to go back into the art world, but I really want to do something that aligns with my passions, my interest in Black cultural production. And at that time, a lot of my peers, they're in VC, they're in tech, they're in banking, private equity, and more. And they had a lot of discretionary income. And I was telling them that, you're putting money into stocks, you're looking at buying real estate, you should really consider purchasing art. And, from still being kind of connected to the art world at that time and with other peers and colleagues in the art world, we were talking about how we don't really see that many Black collectors and things like that. And I just thought, okay, the people I know from business school and working in these corporate industries, you would be perfect art collectors. You have the discretionary income, you're interested in getting involved in arts and culture in general, and you don't know where to start. So I started taking them to any artist studios I would go to, any exhibition openings I would go to, and just making sure that they were culturally engaged. And it was also a way to make sure that while I was working in the corporate space, I was also culturally engaged. And so I found myself in this really niche position where I had an art history background and a business background. So I could easily understand things in the art world and also easily understand things in the corporate world. And I was almost acting like a liaison between the two industries with my friends who were in corporate spaces. And that's kind of where the idea of ISE-Da began. And I tried actually to launch it in 2018, and it was just more of a consulting firm in general. And I realized I had no clue what I was doing. Like, my experience in the art was just, I had an art history degree. Yeah, maybe I'd interned at the National Gallery and the High Museum, but that didn't mean that I then knew what it meant to be an advisor. And I think especially sometimes coming from different industries, you think that, oh, with the creative industries, it's just like a one size fits all approach. I think like, oh, I was a consultant or I worked in consulting for 2 years. I can easily do this. And the art industry is so specialized and you need a lot of specialized knowledge. And definitely starting ISE-Da and realizing I was just way out of my depth. I said, okay, if this is something I really want to do, I have a lot of work to do to prepare to actually launch it properly. And the one way I thought of doing it was going to Sotheby's Institute of Art. So that's when I applied to Sotheby's Institute of Art, and I built my business plan and everything for ISE-Da. And I wanted to go into that program and use it as an incubator for the advisory, and just making sure that I'm refining the business plan, the ideas behind it, my motivations and things like that, and really using those 2 years to make it as strong as possible. And so I was able to officially launch it in 2020. And how we've separated the advisory now is really into 4 sections. So we have individual advisory, which is like traditional one-on-one supporting clients, helping them purchase works of art. We have a new collectors program, which I love working on, which is a membership program where we take them to studio visits after hours. We have galleries that are open to us after hours so they can really immerse themselves in the art world and help them develop strategies to build an art collection. And we also source and sell work to them. We have corporate programming. So we've done some panels and programs at different companies such as Google and MasterCard. And then we have special projects and initiatives. So for that, we've done things like served as a cultural partner for Carnegie Hall's Afrofuturism Festival. And we also helped Cultural DC launch an inaugural program called Torrents, which focuses on the speculation of Black contemporary art, as well as like Black future building through visual art, film, performance, and more. So that's kind of how we separated the advisory. So it just keeps me on my toes as well. And it also allows me to delve into other interests around us. So it's not just solely about selling. And it really, as we expanded our mission, we talked about how we wanted it to be kind of like a holistic approach to art collecting. It's not just about being a commercial enterprise or just transactional. It's about how can we help people become knowledgeable art collectors? What can we do in general while still focusing on collecting? What can we do in general to support the cultural stewardship of Black contemporary art? And I think doing like the programming, the special initiatives, the new collectors program really helps hit that mission overall.
Well, it seems like you do a lot at ISE-Da. But I really want to also ask you the question of, because you foster these relationships with these collectors, how do you work with collectors to kind of build their collections? Obviously, everyone has specific tastes and artists that they want to collect. How do you really drive the notion home about this holistic practice for collecting with your client base?
Sure. And I mean, I can talk about that, especially in terms of our new collectors program, as well as giving them tours of art spaces, whether it's a studio, an auction house, a gallery, or museum. We also have really intimate sessions with people who are established art collectors, and we speak to them about, okay, what does the relationship of an artist look like when you're beginning collecting and you've just met the artist, and then maybe 10 years later, like how do you make sure that you're still supporting the artist? And I think taking them through that process and also just looking at it from a market perspective and saying, what does it mean to truly support an artist? You're building relationships with other people, whether it's curators, other collectors, other artists. You're always telling people about their work and things like that, making work available for any future museum exhibition so it can be on loan, and just telling them that purchasing the art is just the beginning, and this is really a lifelong process and also a responsibility. So we make sure that they see it like that holistically. So when we're talking about different like museum exhibitions, we say like a lot of this is possible because of the fact collectors have been stewards of art, right? And I think especially when it comes to like Black history, when we look at things like artwork and more, it's typically a lot of Black artists. It was Black people that were purchasing their work at first and supporting them. So what this means not only in terms of like now, but also from, I guess, historically, how Black culture, history, narratives, and understanding has been stewarded by people. And I think by hitting those different points, people can better understand like the holistic nature of what it means to be a collector. So you can't just buy it and then just be in your house and stare at it. And I think a lot of the collectors we bring in to speak to young Black professionals are also really dynamic collectors. So they even talk about, okay, like what am I getting out of this artwork that I'm having in my home? How can other people who come into my space learn from this artwork? And maybe if I no longer get anything from this artwork, when I sell it, how can I do it in a way that's not maybe like exploiting an artist or like their career, but making sure that who I'm selling it to is someone that can also gain something from this artwork. So, and I'm making sure that they understand that this is a whole community building and almost like world building process that they're a part of. I think seeing it in that perspective, instead of just focusing on, this is what you like, how much is it? Okay, let's try and help you buy it, helps them understand like the wider responsibility around it. And I think that we see that they come away from our sessions with that notion because they're talking to their friends about it. And they've been referring their friends to like our new collectors program or to come to some of the panels that we host. They've even referred us to the companies that they work at to speak to people internally about this. So I think that we're already seeing them instill the ideas that we are building within the advisory into their own communities. And that just directly aligns with what we want to do with building a community of really phenomenal future Black art collectors.
Yeah, it's also interesting because, that concept also builds on the fact that you also really immerse people into the art world.
Yeah.
Let them understand how it works.
Yeah.
Because as we know, it can be very like opaque at times.
Yes.
And then you also mentioned that you do these panels and these events. Can you talk a little bit about that leg of ISE-Da and like what's coming up?
Sure. So we do a lot of panels and we try and make our panels really interactive because I, in the past, haven't been actually a fan of panels. I sometimes feel that when you go, you're being spoken at instead of spoken to, and I don't think it's a real conversation. So we've been, I guess, experimenting with different panel formats, and we found one that really works for us. So we start off typically opening the floor with some questions, and we actually make people break out and we say, okay, everyone connect with someone that you've never met before, that you didn't meet in the past 10 minutes while we were having a session where everyone came in and was networking. And these are the questions that we want you to discuss. Introduce yourselves to one another, talk about this, and we're all going to come together. And that's also a way where we've had the panelists also go out and meet different people in the space. So they're also participating in that. And it also helps because when we have that at the beginning of our programs, if people are coming in late, they're not feeling like uncomfortable because, there's a panel happening, I have to be quiet. They're seeing people engage with each other, and it's an easy way for people to just immerse themselves into the activities and the programs that we're doing. And then we all get together and we're all discussing things ourselves. And I love having that at the beginning of the panels and having the typical Q&A at the end because it makes people comfortable in the space. You're talking to other people, you're hearing their thoughts. And there's always such a wealth of knowledge in the audience. Like, yes, the people on the panel are experts in their own rights, but you always also have experts who are in the audience as well. You have curators, you have collectors, you have directors, you have people who even work at admin that can give really different perspectives. And I think it's really important to elicit as much knowledge as you can in these spaces. So we do that. We have a typical panel and we have a Q&A session. And we try and always slightly change the topic of the panels. So our focus again is collecting, but looking at collecting from different perspectives. So we'll have maybe a collector and an artist on a panel and a conversation between a collector and an artist and what that means in that relationship. We'll have a panel with a collector and a curator. So how do collectors support curation and things like that? And so we make sure that even though we're focusing on collecting, we're looking at these different perspectives so they understand, once again, this holistic nature of what collecting means and how it's important and why it's important to the art industry. Those are the kind of panels that we have, and people have really enjoyed them. We've hosted them at like Soho houses. We've hosted them internally at corporations. We've hosted it at 2045 Studio, which is a new members club for professionals of color, which has been really wonderful. And we have a really exciting panel coming up in September, the week of the Armory Show. We're going to be announcing that this week, hopefully.
Okay.
We have great panelists, and I'm really, really excited for this panel.
And it's going to be happening during the Armory Fair?
Not during the week the Armory Show
Okay.
is happening, not in partnership with the fair, but
Okay.
once again at 2045 Studio. So I'm very, very excited for
Oh,
that. Yes.
nice. Great. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing who's going to be on the panel.
Thanks. Yes.
No, that's really wonderful. What made you want to start this and become an entrepreneur? Because for those who don't start their own business, they don't really understand how much work
It's so much
something
work.
like this is. So I want to know, what was the moment for you where you were like, you know what, I'm going to be an entrepreneur and I'm going to start this?
It's really funny because I always tell my friends that I actually love being an employee. And I said, oh, you know, you have your own business. Yeah, but I really love being an employee. I don't think you understand me. And I think doing, like, you know, I have a full-time job as well. Just doing both things at the same time, it's so much work having your own business. And, you know, ISE-Da is small and we're working towards expanding right now. But even with a small team, every day I think it will take a certain amount of effort, and I'm putting in more effort than expected. And I think just being comfortable with knowing that, like, it's always going to take more than I expect, and just knowing that these are the long-term goals I have and this is what I'm working towards helps me think, okay, let me actually get up and get this done. Let me do this and make sure I'm on task and on time with things. I don't think I actually ever wanted to be an entrepreneur. It was, I think, that time in 2018, you know, I've had these internship experiences, I've had these degrees, I'm working in corporate spaces. And those 2 years when I was working in corporate, I was really trying to figure out where I could be in the art world. And I just I wasn't finding job roles. And when I was researching, just talking to people and just seeing things that other people were doing, I wasn't finding something that I was saying, okay, this is really me. Like, this is really what I would want to do. This is what I really love. So I decided that, okay, if I can't find the roles that I want, I can make those roles myself. And that's why I wanted to be an art advisor. And I think what I liked about being an art advisor, and when I was talking to people who were advisors and people who'd work with advisors, that you could really make your own role. It's really what you make of it. You know, I don't have to only be, okay, I want to sell this, I want to sell that. I mean, even though that's the crux of what an advisor is, but I can also indulge in other things I'm interested in. So when we first launched, we did educational projects. So we started off with the art of Black liberation. So how art has been vital to movements for social justice across the Black diaspora. We did a program on the Black speculative art. So after liberation, what does Black speculative future building look like? And looking at visual art through the lens of Afrofuturism, Afrosurrealism, and things like that. So I think being an art advisor, I was able to still focus on the commercial side, but also indulge in things that I'm interested in. So like theory, so programming and education, community building and things like that. And I don't think I was seeing that dynamism in other roles I was researching at that time. And when I was in Sotheby's and I was working on this, I was working part-time as well. And I was working at a gallery. I worked in art press for a bit. You know, I worked in the VIP team for a week at the Armory Show and things like that. And that helped me get a better understanding of the commercial side of the art world too. And even though I really loved those roles and I was learning so much from it, and to this day, there's so many skills and nuances that I've picked up from all these different roles, I still wasn't finding something that is what I wanted to do. And especially focusing on the Black diaspora and art of the Black diaspora. And this is something that I felt was very overlooked. And especially if you look at art in the Caribbean, I think that's still typically overlooked in the art world. So just really wanting to focus on connectivity in the diaspora, cultural production in the diaspora and things like that, I wasn't going to find that in a role. And a role that allowed me to not feel limited and able to do so many different things. So that's kind of where it came from.
Yeah, no, it's, you know, they always say that the most successful businesses are those that fill a niche that's there. And I feel like ISE-Da does that in a very holistic and unique way.
Thank you.
So you're doing a great job. What would you say is your favorite aspect of the job?
I love introducing people to art. Like,
Okay.
seriously, deep down, I'm an art nerd. Like I've known this, I've accepted it, and I think just bringing people into art. And I always tell people, one of the things I love about art is that there are so many things that it touches that people don't realize. It touches politics, like looking at politics from a cultural perspective, you do that through art. Even looking, when I studied fine art and finance at Sotheby's, like art, people considering as an alternative asset, helping people understand finances and things like that. There's so many things that art is a vehicle to understanding, whether it's ourselves, whether it's the world at large and things like that. So there's really something out there for everyone. And I think bringing people into that is something that's really exciting for me, and finding ways to help people connect with art. I think also just seeing the different things that people like is always so interesting. Like you can show someone a piece that I'm like, oh, this is the most phenomenal thing I've ever seen. They're like, well, not really. I don't really like that. And I like this, and this is why I like it. So I think it's this working with clients is this learning process, a continuous learning process. And it helps me understand more about art more than I expected to. And I think I really enjoy that. And obviously making a sale, not necessarily just because, okay, I made a sale, but really seeing someone love a piece of art. Like we've gone through this process, we've spoken to the artist, we're doing the shipping, we're doing installation. And, when they receive it, we're helping them put it up on their walls, and just really seeing how enamored they become with a piece of art. I really love that aspect of it. I think it's great.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I feel like that's incredibly rewarding.
Yeah.
And now that we've talked about your favorite aspect, what is the most challenging aspect of your job?
Admin. Oh my gosh.
You're like, admin.
Admin. Like it's just so much admin that you have to do. And I feel like there's even comes with like, as you get older, like there's so much life admin. So you have life admin, then you have this ISE-DA admin as well. I'm like, okay, I need to send this email. I need to write this newsletter. And it takes time, but it's just something that it needs to get done. And I think just when finding a schedule for it helps me get it done. And that's one thing I think has been really good. I have made a system where I'm saying, okay, I need to get back to this person, this person. And, I work a 9-to-5 job, so I have a limited time to do it. So I'm saying, okay, I'm on the subway, I have internet, let me get my emails out now. I need to text this person or email this person in 5 months' time. Let me schedule it now. And just making sure that I'm being proactive. And I've definitely got myself into the mindset of, if it's not taking me more than 5 minutes to do it, let me do it now. So I don't have to think about it in the future. And I think that's helped me become more comfortable with all the admin aspects of it. So
yeah, I can imagine. And I actually want to touch on the fact that you do, in fact, have a full-time job while also running ISE-DA. And you are you're working as a development manager of arts and culture at Orange Barrel Media.
Yes.
So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes. Orange Barrel Media is such a wonderful and unique company. And while I've been working and building ISE-DA for the past 4 years, I've always been working a 9-to-5 job. And I've always told myself, like, as I progress through different jobs, I want to find a job that fits me more. And I'm so happy to say that Orange Barrel Media is it. So it's something that's perfect, I think, for me, because there's a lot of business aspects to it, but it's also very art focused. And as a development manager, I work with artists, art organizations, like locally, maybe like nationally, as well as like institutions, to source art to put on our digital and static assets like across America, just so we can help people be more engaged with art in their communities and things like that. The CEO is a big art collector, Pete Scantland. He's phenomenal, amazing art collection. He's on the board at the MoCA in LA, the Wexner Center, and the Columbus Museum of Art. And we have 3 offices, and they all have works from his collection on the walls. So it's just really lovely to have a 9-to-5 job that is also very art focused. And it's a way for me to always be involved in the art. So ISE-DA is very focused on art of the Black diaspora. And what I really love about working at Orange Barrel Media is I have these business aspect, the art aspect. But with the art aspect, I'm learning about things outside of what I specialize in for ISE-DA. So it helps me keep up with the art market even more and consistently be knowledgeable. And I really enjoy that aspect. My team, the team I work on, my director, also someone that has a really strong art background. So it's really great, once again, learning from other people. And I also work directly with other people on the development team who maybe aren't on the arts team, people who work in maybe construction and more. So I'm always learning about the other side of the business and learning more about what they're up to, their backgrounds and things like that. So I think it just helps keep me a bit more well-rounded, which I really enjoy.
Can you tell us a little bit about your kind of day-to-day at Orange Barrel, kind of your responsibilities there?
My responsibilities is really just working to build relationships with like different artists and more, helping people if we have any digital signs, making sure that we have art to host on those digital signage, so people have a variety of art, as well as understanding the artists and who are the art organizations locally, and just providing that kind of ad space for organizations, and making sure that we're bringing art into the public realm, and also providing the opportunity for people to know more about art and local organizations in their spaces.
And how did you end up working at Orange Barrel?
Yeah, so before Orange Barrel, I was at Meta. I was on their open arts team. I was the communications coordinator. And in this role, I was developing content about the art that they had in their offices globally, and sharing that with people internally. So making sure, once again, and now that I think about it, I think a lot of my roles are kind of like that, like making sure people are engaged in art. And I see that with ISE-Da. So I think going back to the fact that I love getting people involved in art. So that was kind of my role at Meta. And, there were a lot of layoffs happening. And unfortunately, I was laid off, as well as a lot of my team were laid off. But someone I worked with at Meta had transitioned to Orange Barrel Media. And I'm a big fan of Tal Lewis's art. And I was posting about her work. She's someone I wrote about her during my master's thesis as well. I'm a huge fan of her practice. And I was posting about her work on my Instagram story. And my old colleague who was at Orange Barrel Media said, "Oh, we have a Tal Lewis work in our office. You should come and see it." And I said, "Okay, let me come and see it." And so I came in just to see the artwork, and the way he spoke about Orange Barrel Media and how it's really supportive. It's a great culture, great people. Everyone there is absolutely brilliant, no matter what background they come from, and how he enjoyed the space made me very curious about the company. And just the way he was speaking about it. And when I then did my own research, I said, okay, I need to apply to this job, and I really want to work at this company. So that's kind of how I got into it.
Wow.
Because of Tal Lewis.
Wow. I mean, it's always, those connections that you form with
Yeah.
people somehow get you from one place to the next.
Yeah. And yeah, when I went to the office and when I saw the artwork and then I saw what my colleague was saying, I said, I need to work at this company. Like, I really want to work at this company. And I did it. So I was really happy about that.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So before we backtrack to the very beginning, I also want to cover the fact that you were listed on Forbes' 30 Under 30 in 2024, which is an incredible accomplishment. How did that make you feel?
It made me feel really happy, and I don't know if necessarily validated is the right term, because I felt like what I was doing was needed anyway, but it was just like a nice little, okay, another stamp of approval. Like, this is something that is needed and people are interested in supporting it. I think it's really easy in the art world to kind of feel like, okay, am I making progress? Is this helping? Is this worth it? What value am I adding? And I think that just helped me. It just kind of gave me a kick and be like, of course, this is like really helpful. Like, this is great. And it really helped give me even more confidence and even more encouragement to keep going. I really love the network that it's provided me. The people in my cohort are also just really brilliant and intelligent, whether they're in like marketing, whether they're in all these different, I guess, areas that people are on the list for. And being able to speak to them and once again learn from them has been really great. A lot of people have reached out to me to see like, okay, how can we work with ISE-Da, or how can I be part of the New Collectors program? So we have a really long list of like a backlog for like our New Collectors program, which is why we're looking to expand the business to make sure that we can support these Black professionals. And yeah, it's just been really wonderful to get ISE-Da's name more out there to people who may not be as connected like in the art world, or just know about what is it that we're doing at ISE-Da. So it's just been a really wonderful experience. And I'm just really excited to keep meeting more people in that Forbes community.
Yeah,
So,
no,
yeah.
that's incredible. It's quite an achievement.
Thank
So now
you.
let's backtrack to the very beginning.
Yes.
You were raised in England.
Yes.
You went to school in Switzerland,
Yes.
and then you ended up in college in the United States. So walk me through this process.
Okay, so my parents are Nigerian, and my mom. Well, I met in Nigeria. My mom moved to England. My dad moved to the States where he did his master's, and when they were married, he moved to England with her, and that's when they started their family. So my siblings and I, born and raised in the UK. We're not in London, as people always assume I'm from London. I'm from Essex, so it's outside of London. My parents always wanted us to be very culturally engaged, so they would always take us to shows at museums, they take us to gallery openings, they take us to the theater, they make sure we're reading literature and things like that. And I think in our own way, we all kind of stuck with creativity in some ways. Like my sister, she does like things like cross stitching and crocheting. Like my other sister is really interested in things like content creation, etc. But I was the person that was really in the fine arts. So that's something that I carried with me through my schooling in England. When I was younger, maybe when I was like maybe 7 or so, my dad, he was also in consulting. So he started working internationally for a lot of his projects and would be home on the weekends. And he started a contract in Switzerland, and he absolutely loved it. And he told my mom that the kids need to go to school here. The schooling here is phenomenal. Like it'll be really great for them. It'll help them be really well-rounded, really sharp, etc. And so we always started planning to go to Switzerland. So I'm a twin. I have a twin sister, and my older brother and sister are also twins. So there's 2 years between us. So we call them the older set. So the older set, they moved to Switzerland first. So I was like maybe 14. They moved when they were 16, and they finished their GCSEs in the UK and did international baccalaureate in Switzerland. And so when I was 16 and I was finishing my GCSEs and they finished their international baccalaureate, they moved to the States for college. And then my sister and I, my mom, we then moved to Switzerland with my dad. And once we were done with our international baccalaureate, my sister and I, we moved to America for college. And we've also always known that we were going to go to college in America because like my dad did his master's there. Half of my family, so all of my dad's siblings and some of my parents' cousins, they live in America. So we've always been going to America. So we always had that familiarity with the States. And my parents loved the schooling system for university in America. And so once again, it was always something that we knew was coming. I didn't know I would end up in Atlanta, but I'm so happy I did. And going to Emory, I think, was by far one of the best decisions I made for my education. So,
Can you tell us a little bit how your studies at Emory reinforced kind of where you ended up now?
I applied to Emory and I wanted to be a visual arts major, and then got rid of the visual arts major. So naturally, I decided I was going to be a doctor because that just made sense to me at that time. And I realized that chemistry in college is very different from chemistry in high school. And I was really suffering my first semester. So
Girl, you and me both, honestly.
I could not. And I think what really, sometimes things are hard. You say, okay, I should really work through this. The time I realized that this wasn't the kind of difficulty to work through, but it was really time for me to just move on to something else, was when I studied for weeks. I was not sleeping. I took the exam. And it wasn't that I didn't know the answers. I legitimately thought I understood what was happening. And I got my grade back and I said, you know what, it's enough. Like, I can't do this. And I said, okay, it's time for me to think of something else. So I then said, okay, let me be pre-biz, because I think with business, it's good because you get all these transferable skills. I think with anything, you get transferable skills, but I think it's more apparent for me anyway in business. And I can figure out what it is I want to do by the time I graduate. And my freshman year, I was taking art history electives. And I took Art History 101. I really enjoyed it. And my professor, Linda Merrill, was saying, I think you should consider this as your second major. And I said, okay, well, maybe. I wanted to be a practicing artist, which is why I wanted to be a visual arts major. So I didn't really ever consider art history, art theory, things like that. And so she really pushed and said, no, you should make this your second major. And she became my academic advisor for the rest of my time for my art history degree. And she was the person that was always telling me, okay, there's this internship. You should consider applying for it. You should consider this, and like making sure that I was very well aware of the different opportunities for me in that space. And that was so helpful. So I had that, and I had business. But one thing I really love about Emory is that, it's a liberal arts college, and there's just so much opportunity to learn different things. I was taking so many different classes. I was taking political science. I was taking linguistics. I took so many different classes. And the couple of classes I think really changed the way I just viewed life in general. I took an Afro-Latin studies class, which is a religion class, and talking about Black people in the Appalachia region, and talking about how a lot of what they practice in terms of religion was influenced by African religion, and how it was retained past the transatlantic slavery and more. And just thinking about this idea of like retaining culture and preserving culture, and then also learning about it in terms of South America. So Brazil, when you have things like Candomblé or Umbanda, or you have Santeria in Cuba, this idea of like retaining culture past the traumas that like Black people have experienced was something that I really started to learn about more in college. And then taking like a women and gender studies course that really helped me understand theory more. I'm trying to think about how to even convey this. Like the things that we were learning about, like we studied Fred Moten's Mining the Museum in that class, and we were talking about curation and how curation can either tell a story or hide a story, and how Fred Wilson was able to do that through Mining the Museum. I think just understanding things past surface level was something that was really, really interesting to me. Understanding things like an archive versus like performance, or looking at, there was this one article we read called Choreography as an Apparatus of Capture, and talking about how improvisation is just can be a way to just show progression maybe, but it's not actually changing anything fundamentally, right? Choreography or like the status quo is something that is still foundational, and looking at things like this, like politics, but through the idea of like dance or like an archive and things like that was like really interesting to me. So just showing how interdisciplinary everything is, and how you don't have to necessarily stick onto one track to understand things or to have a career and more. And I think that's kind of where I was putting all of these things together. So like understanding Blackness through learning about dance or something like that, learning about cultural repatriation, cultural retention, cultural exchange, etc., through museum work and things like that. And just as I was learning more about it, obviously like being in America, it's a very political country.
Yeah.
And you see that on a day-to-day in a way that I wasn't really experiencing, or maybe I wasn't even aware I was experiencing in the UK because I was so young. I think having those influences externally and also having these educational influences made me want to focus on, okay, like how can I really support the retention and preservation of Black culture? And I think Black culture, because I have this like vast history of wanting to be like a visual artist. I was studying art history. My parents were always making sure that I understood culture, whether through going through these exhibitions or the books that we had at home on like Yoruba arts and culture, on Greek mythology or something, like this idea that culture is so central to everything we do, even though maybe people want to focus more on things like sciences, etc., was something that was always instilled in me. So I think college just helped me kind of put the puzzle pieces together. That's really where I was discovering it.
Yeah, no, that's incredible. And the thing that you just said about curation, either, highlighting a story or hiding a story, it's like, now that makes me wonder how many stories are actually still buried in all these archives and museums.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think, that Fred Wilson, I said Fred Moten, but Fred Wilson, like reading the Mining the Museum was something that is impactful. And actually in the New Collectors program, when we went to the Frick to see the Barclay Hendricks show, which was so good. So good.
Loved it.
And
in that space too.
In that
it was
space.
Incredible.
And we actually ended up getting into a discussion at the front of the Frick, and people who were coming in were like kind of like talking to us about what they thought, because we had some extra free tickets. So we also just gave it out to people for free. And when they came back, they came to join us, and we were just having this discussion. And I brought up Fred Wilson's mining the museum, and I shared it with people in the New Collectors program. So that kind of goes back to wanting to make sure that in this program, like all the things like I'm learning or my peers in the art world are sharing with me in articles, that I'm also passing that along to people to make sure that they're informed collectors, and just wanting to make sure that they're also putting together pieces of the puzzle. Like, what does it mean for Barclay Hendricks' work to be next to all of these pieces of work? Like, how has that affected art history and things like that, to make sure that they're keeping these things in mind? And even when you're putting together your collection, when you're talking about putting up in your space, what are the stories that you want to tell through your collection? And that's how you can build a strategy. And even thinking about what is it that you're interested in terms of building your collection, how are we fitting into this wider art historical canon by either contributing to it, to making sure that any of these overlooked or hidden histories are being exposed and shared with others, and I guess making sure that they have those kind of things in mind. So
Yeah, no, that's actually, yeah, that's incredible. Um, Obviously, being at Emory in Atlanta was great because Atlanta also has an incredible art and film scene.
yes.
And then you ended up doing your internships there while you were in school.
Yes.
Tell us about your first internship.
I went at my first internship was at the High Museum, and before that I did the summer program for the Andrew Mellon Curatorial Fellowship. And I think with a lot of people, when they're really starting off in like the art world, you know, when you're young, and even people like at this age, you may not know much about the art world, the first thing they say is like a curator. So I was like, I'm gonna be a curator. You know, I didn't really know what else it was I can do. Like, I'm gonna be a curator. Like, this is what I'm going to do. And I did the summer program, and I didn't unfortunately get the fellowship, but it was just such a really enlightening experience for me to say, okay, these are all the functions that happen in a museum. Like, curation is one thing. You have conservation, you have education, you have all of these different things that help a museum run. And I think it just really opened my eyes to the possibilities of the art world. And I think as I've grown up, and like even when I was at Sotheby's and more, like, and even now, I'm always learning, okay, these are the other things that can exist in the art world. So after that, I did my first internship at the High Museum, and I worked in the decorative arts department as an intern, and I really enjoyed that experience. And I also developed a close relationship with the African art curator at the High Museum, and she was always telling me about all these different things happening in the African diaspora for art. And we actually ended up going to New York one summer for the first 154 Contemporary African Art Fair that was in Red Hook. So things like that, I think, were very formative for me in terms of what I wanted to do in the arts. I did some business internships too. I worked in like brand development and brand marketing at Newell Brands. I worked at this art consulting firm where I was doing a lot of admin, and I
Your
was
favorite.
helping my favorite thing. And I was helping out with some artist studios and really getting to know the Atlanta art scene more. And then when I was graduating my last year in college, I already accepted an offer to work in as an analyst at this in this consulting division in the EPC industry. But I said, I really, really, really want to do something art related, and I don't want it to be in Atlanta because all of my experience has been in Atlanta. And this job, even though I was going to travel a lot, I was still going to be Atlanta based. And I said, I just really want to do something art that's not in Atlanta. And I applied to the National Gallery of Art internship, and I was so happy to get it. And it was just such a great experience because I started doing research for their Gordon Parks exhibition. And I also worked in the education department, and I developed a draft for a teacher's resource to talk about issues such as immigration through contemporary art, and talking about things like, okay, why are some people considered immigrants and why are some people considered expats? And I also was able to do some gallery tours for people talking about cultural appropriation versus cultural exchange, looking through works by Black diasporic artists, so Yinka Shonobare and Iona Rosiel Brown, and like, what does that mean as people who are Black and maybe lived in a different country and were integrating some of those cultural practices from their background to where they were living now, and like especially for Iona Rosiel Brown, who lived in Japan for some time, and looking at Yinka Shonobare's work, who talks about Dutch wax prints and how African identity was our contemporary idea of African identity through fabric and clothing is not actually the traditional African identity, but it's actually formulated through maybe colonial means and things like that. So like trying to understand appropriation versus exchange and how that has manifested through Black histories across the diaspora.
Are you sure you don't want to be a curator?
No,
Because
I don't.
you're doing like a great job, like
No, thank you.
really bringing forward themes and discussions that need to be had.
Yeah, I would love to curate. Well, I tell people like I curate maybe like every now and again. I've done like 2 things. But I don't think I would. I've seen some amazing curators. I don't know if I would be a strong curator, but I love exploring ideas. I love writing about art, and I think I want to delve more into that and writing. And maybe curation can be, I don't know, a branch of the writing that I do, but I love writing about art. And I think that's something I picked up through my art history courses at Emory. Like I love writing essays. And I know a lot of people hate writing essays.
Yeah.
Me, give me an essay. I can write it. I can do that.
Yeah. While you were in DC doing this internship, what was your favorite part about that?
Oh, I think just being in DC, like I love the institutions in DC. So I was able to do things like go to the Portrait Gallery, going to the Hirshhorn, going to all the different Smithsonians, and the I know the acronym, but the New African American Museum, the National Museum of African American History and Culture in DC. I would like wake up to get those tickets that came up at 6 a.m. and book it and make sure I was able to go during my lunch break. So doing things like that and just really exploring the art scene outside of Atlanta, I really enjoyed. The people I worked with at the National Gallery, I always say to this day, I just speak so highly of them and always sing their praises. Like the way that they were very open to saying, okay, I want to explore this. Like, can I do this? Of course. How can we make you explore this and learn about this? And I think just having people on my team that I was reporting to make space for me and make space for my curiosity in the arts that way was something that was really grounding for me. And I think, you know, when I've said that some of the roles I found a bit limiting, I think it's because of experiences like that where I've had roles that people made space for my curiosity, and seeing it as I got older, there were some roles that were a bit more restrictive and limiting, and that also pushed me more towards advisory. So what roles can I have that allow me to explore my interests and what I'm interested in exploring more, delving into more and things like that. So I think that team, that institution, I think it really did wonders for me to be like, I definitely want to come back to the arts after this role in corporate.
Yeah, you know, and I also think that a lot of people see Washington, D.C., obviously as, you know, the capital of the United States and mostly tied to politics, but it has an incredibly rich art scene.
Incredibly. And even just like looking at the galleries that are based there, like Kayla Mitchell Gallery, the Mahari Sequa Gallery, there is just so much happening. And I think that there is so much culture in DC past the politics, even past the arts, like culture of people and communities in DC that people don't recognize. And even when I went to Emory, there were people I went to school with who are from that area. And even within DC, in Maryland, in Virginia, in that area, there's so many different subcultures in different parts. And yeah, I don't think that's appreciated enough.
Yeah, no, I agree. Because honestly, even personally, I didn't really start discovering DC's art scene until like I graduated from like my master's program.
Yeah. It's a really good art. Very, very, people always think of it just as the museum institution. Yeah. That's a big part of it, but there's so much more outside of that that people I think should really explore.
Yeah, 100%. I agree. So you were at the High Museum of Art, the National Gallery in DC. You're an analyst at Black & Veatch.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, it's really funny when people tell people like I worked in the EPC industry. And I say, what? And I said, it was kind of random, but I'm so happy I did it. And it was such a great experience. And I think sometimes if people like look at my resume, some people have said, you're all over the place. And I said, it seems like that, but when you really delve and look at the skills that I was picking up, it makes sense what I did. And I think that the fact that I went to the commercial side of the art industry, I already had this business experience working in the consulting division. So I was there for 2 years and I was part of a rotational program. And so as an analyst, I was working on different projects. So like the first 10 months I was in Allentown, Pennsylvania. Then I went to New Orleans for a few months. I went to like Houston / the Woodlands for a few months. Then I was in like Keystone, I think that was called, in Florida, but I had to fly into like Gainesville or Jacksonville to get there. Then I was back in Allentown, and I was working on projects from requirements testing for some of their assets in the field for our clients. I was working on things like data governance, organizational change management, helping companies build like processes for new project management offices. And one thing I loved about Black and Veatch, like when I say I was in consulting, people think, oh, you're at Deloitte, so you're at Bain or Accenture. I said, no, I wasn't in any of like the big firms. But I loved working at Black and Veatch because it was a smaller firm. The experience that we got immediately was just unmatched. Like I immediately was traveling every week for like 2 years straight. I was immediately getting client facing time and be able to speak to clients, and really getting that face time with clients, I think is not something some people get to maybe a couple of years, maybe 4 years like into their career. And to have that immediately, it was extremely rewarding for me. I'm pretty sure I was the only person that had an art history degree.
I can imagine.
Yeah. But people, they were like, had chemical engineering degrees or mechanical engineering degrees. And it was just like nice. Like I like tinkering. So I was able to, and I love Excel. Like to this day, I love anything Excel related. I'll do it. I love Excel. So being able to like build things on Excel, processes, etc., was something that I really liked, and it really helped me keep my business skills sharp. I think it was like a wonderful 2 years. The people who are at Black and Veatch have been so supportive since I transitioned back into the art world. And they sign up to our newsletters. I love seeing that they've read it and things like that. And I'm just like a wonderful culture of people, supportive, kind, extremely intelligent, once again, open to my curiosities. And I think that's one thing I've realized in my career trajectory that I love. I really thrive in environments that support my curiosity. So I was working on this project in Allentown for 10 months. And I was really interested in distributed energy resources, renewable energy. So I was just networking across the company. And I said, I would like to be on a project that focuses on this. I did, as part of our technology conference, I did a presentation on distributed energy resources and how they can be helpful to Caribbean nations and help them mitigate climate catastrophes like Hurricane Irma or Hurricane Maria and things like that. And from doing that through networking and I'm really advocating for myself and saying, I want to work on these kind of projects. I was able to transition to a new project earlier than I expected. And I think that's one thing I really loved about that company. They were just so open to, oh, you're curious about this, you want to learn about this. Okay, how can we make that happen? And working with you. And it just made me realize that your career can really and truly be in your hands. You just need to work with people and make sure that they understand what it is that you want, and you need to be vocal about that. And that's something that I've once again just carried on, even coming back to the art industry. Like, this is what I want to do, and how can we make this happen, and things like that. And that's obviously helped me launch ISE-DA as well.
Yeah. And I can only imagine like traveling so often that you got the opportunity to also like see different art things in all these different cities.
Yeah, I was sneaking out at my lunch break. I was like, I'm in New Orleans Museum of Art. They had the Lila Iris Victor exhibition. That's where I'm going. As soon as it hit 12, I'll be back, guys. Let me go to the museum. And I also used to drag my coworkers to come with me too, and to see them like really enjoy art was really rewarding for me. So when I left and I came to New York for Sotheby's, when they were in town, I would walk them through the Armory show, or walk them through Volta, or walk them through NADA and things like that. And then maybe I wasn't going to Miami one year, but they will go to Miami Art Basel now, and they'll send me pictures on Instagram like, oh, I saw this art. I didn't really understand it. Can you explain it to me? And things like that. So I think, once again, just getting people to really love, engage with, and appreciate art is something that I really enjoyed doing. And I made sure I did it somehow when I was working in corporate.
Yeah.
So
after Black and Veatch, you also worked as a gallery assistant at Cheryl Hazan Gallery, or was that before?
Yes, that was after Black and Veatch. So when I was at Sotheby's, I was working at like part-time jobs. So I did Cheryl Hazan Gallery, among some other things, to really get my feet wet in the commercial side and really understand what it means to navigate like the gallery world, just understand the different market forces in the art world.
So after Black and Veatch, you decided to leave, and that's when you went to do Sotheby's in New York.
Yeah, I left Black and Veatch and started my degree 2 days later.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah,
okay.
No, I literally drove up to New York, like unpacked my things, and I was like, okay, I need to go to school.
What made you want to do that transition?
I'm very much someone that I'm like, okay, what's next? Like, how can I push myself? What can I learn? Like, I really do love challenging myself and saying, okay, what can I do? I really missed art. I really missed engaging with art, focusing on art, learning about art. And since I had started this idea and this business plan for ISE-Da, going to Sotheby's, I think was perfect. And I always wanted to be in New York. Like, I'm happy I did Atlanta for 2 years, or I was based there, even though I was traveling every week. I wanted to be in New York because I think no matter what industry you're in, if you plant yourself in New York, people are going to come to New York at some point in the year. And there's just so much happening. And, you know, there's so much happening in New York. So
yeah,
you
we were
can
just talking about that too. We're like, it's so overwhelming.
It can be so overwhelming, and it's sometimes good. Like, I've always said that I think that in your 20s, you should live in New York for 1 year.
100%.
Just for 1 year, just to have that experience. And I've been here for like 3 to 5 years now. So, I mean, I don't know if I'm leaving. Probably not. But
well, who knows? You like to do new things like all the time. So
I do. But that's the thing. New York is always changing. So I always feel like there's a new New York, right? There's new galleries opening up all the time or moving to New York. It's always changing. Like, New York 5 years ago is not New York today.
100%.
And that's what I really like about it. It's very dynamic. So I think I just wanted that transition to be in New York. I wanted to be in the art world. And, you know, I said I'm a nerd. I love school. And I feel like I've accepted that. Like, I was talking to a family member a couple of days ago, and they're like, when are you getting your PhD? And I was like, I'm not getting any more student loans. And they're like, but you love school. I was like, I know. I love being in school, but I don't think I'm going to get a PhD.
You never know.
Never know.
You never know.
I really don't like student loans.
Yes, that's like the one thing that I really don't like about the American education system.
Yeah.
And, you know, because you've also studied in Europe, is the fact that you actually have to pay these exorbitant amounts of money for schooling.
Yeah.
Especially higher education.
Exactly. Like, I do love school. And I think it was also another excuse for me to go back to school. And, you know, just to read. And my master's thesis was on Black speculative art. So I was comparing and contrasting Afrofuturism and Afro-Surrealism, and seeing, okay, what is the best foundation or framework for Black liberation? And I wouldn't have been able to get that chance if I was in school. And like I said, I don't consider myself a curator. Maybe I'll curate a couple of things, but that was my curatorial thesis. And I was like, okay, this is an opportunity for me to like envision what a show focused on Black speculation through Black liberation looks like. And it was a really wonderful experience. So once again, being able to tinker, to think, to explore, to research, and to really push my boundaries and challenge myself in these different aspects. So I did my curatorial master's thesis. I studied art law. I loved art law. It was so interesting. I studied fine art and finance. I studied international art markets and how they develop and things like that. So it really helped me get, once again, like a good overview and understanding of market forces, but through schooling.
Yeah. What made you want to pick Sotheby's? I mean, I did Christie's, and I think Sotheby's and Christie's had some of the best master's programs as an introduction to the art world.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, what made you want to go to Sotheby's?
I think with Sotheby's, I knew someone who had done it. So I think having that connection, and I said, okay, I'll just do Sotheby's, because he loved the experience of the network is great and things like that. And I was also looking at the faculty. I was really interested in building professional relationships with the faculty. So we had Claude Grunetsky, who was an adjunct faculty, Judith Prouder, who was the art law professor, also my academic advisor, so brilliant. And I think like those aspects, and like also looking at the trips that they did. So we went to the Venice Biennale my first semester. And then obviously the pandemic happened like halfway through my program. So we didn't able to do more traveling as we wanted to. But I think just having those experiences said, okay, those are the experiences I want. And I was really excited about that.
What was one of your favorite kind of work experiences while you were at Sotheby's? Because I know you did like internships and you've worked in different places.
Yeah. Even though it was for a week or two, I loved the Armory show, because being able to, I worked at the VIP desk and once again, interfacing with clients, love interfacing with people. And also in the art world, it's also really important to know who's who and what they look like. And I think working at the VIP desk helped me understand that. And then also watching a fair come to life and being there after hours, watching people put things up, watching people take things down at the end of the week. And even when it was closing, being able to like walk around the fair when it was empty, I really enjoyed that experience.
Yeah.
So
My favorite
yeah.
thing to always, whenever I get a chance to, is either seeing an art fair when it's empty or a museum when it's empty.
Exactly.
Just
So good.
the peace and quiet without the hordes of people, because art fairs can get
Exactly.
very crazy and noisy.
Extremely crazy. You want to look at something, but someone's walking in front of you. So having those experiences, I would always try and get there early and leave late, just so I can be able to go through the fair myself. And, you know, once again, being able to learn more about the international art galleries that were showcasing, and I could recognize some of the artists from, you know, people that works I had studied in college and currently at Sotheby's and things like that. It was a really good experience. I enjoyed it.
Art fairs are really great because there's obviously, you have galleries from around the world coming into this one hub with so many different artists, and you always discover something new. Yeah,
I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. So after this, you were also an independent curator at Art on the Avenue in New York City. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
So, funny enough, my school in Switzerland, a peer of mine, Jackie Graham, turns out she did Sotheby's in London. And we didn't know. I didn't even know she was interested in art. And I knew her pretty well when I went to school in Switzerland. And during the pandemic, we kind of, I don't know how, maybe on social media, we like reconnected. And she was like, oh, you did Sotheby's in New York. I did it in London. It was just really funny. And she had just launched this nonprofit called Art on the Ave, where because everything had shut down during the pandemic, they put together these exhibitions in the storefronts of different shops that had closed, and they work with local artists. So at first I was pulled on to be on the approval board, so like approving, let's say, like the artwork and things like that was being submitted, and saying, okay, what artists should you work with? And they'd pass that on to like a curator or something. And then they reached back out to me for the second cycle and was like, would you like to curate like a show? And it was such a good experience. So that's like one of the 2 shows I've said like I've curated. And I think it was really interesting that we had this theme called like resiliency, and we had these works from these different artists, and the process of interacting with local artists, interviewing them, meeting them in person to give me a walkthrough of your practice and things like that, and understanding it and kind of piecing together how, like, what this narrative of resiliency can look like, and also selecting the storefronts that it would go, that would be showcased in. So this show was from Fulton Street Station all the way to Battery Park in different storefronts. And I will call it a moving exhibition because some of the storefronts will say, oh, we've just rented out this space. And then we have to run and we'll say, okay. And then Barbara, Jackie's mom, who was also part of the nonprofit, would say, okay, we're moving this here. And she'll be calling me and say, okay, I'm going to walk through the new tour that we have to give. So we put it up. We also had to give tours to people. And because things were always changing, I'd always have to come and say, how can we rework this narrative? And I kind of like that because it kept me on my toes and saying, okay, how can curatorial statements, how can curation be dynamic? Because it literally was dynamic. We had the same works. We had to like reshuffle things. So just making sure I was always on top of this work might be at Battery Park, but tomorrow it might be at Fulton Street. So how does this work connect with what happened earlier on in the tour? Because it might move there tomorrow. And how can I make sure that there's this consistent narrative between the artists, between the artworks, and with the theme? And I really enjoyed that. And being able to give tours to so many different groups from between May to November was a really good experience as well. I'm even more familiar with New York as well, because I'm walking down from Fulton Street to Battery Park.
And that must have been great for you because you love like talking about art and introducing people to art, and giving these tours was probably super great for you.
It was really, really great for me. I enjoyed it.
Yeah. So after that, that's when you went on to be the communications consultant at Open Art at Meta.
Yes.
And how did you get that job?
I heard about the Open Arts team and I really, really wanted to be on it. So every time they had a role open, I would apply. Like, I'm very much so, what are my transferable skills and how would it work in this role? I really want to work here. And obviously the first 2 times I didn't get it because I really had no business applying to some of those roles. Like, I was not the person. Like, honestly, if they chose me, I'd be so happy, but I'd also be like, I'm not the person for this role, but I really wanted to work on the team. And so to be the coordinator, I applied to the role. I interviewed, and I think by that time I probably interviewed like 3 people on that team. So I think they were kind of familiar with me too because I just kept applying. And I was so happy that they selected me.
At one point, they're like, let's just give this girl a job.
But I was probably just like wearing them down and saying, okay, she really wants to be.
Yeah.
And I was really, really happy to get it because I think that it's so fascinating to me. And I think it made me rethink the idea of what a collection could be. Because I think when you think of a collection, you think, okay, it's like hanging on a wall, it's in someone's house, maybe it's in a client space and things like that. When I think of like corporate collections, I could think of like JP Morgan or like PepsiCo or like Citibank and things like that. But this was so interesting because it's a tech company. And what they would do was commission artists to make site-specific works for their different locations globally. And I had some of my peers who were already working at Meta. And I'm like, do you know who this artist is? No. It's Bazira Khan. Like, do you know how big of a deal that is? And like, oh, no, I didn't know who she was. So my role was to, how can I create content that was also external facing, but also internal facing, so people can understand the history, the importance, and like what are these artists doing and why it's important. And it was just really, really interesting to even see, like, if I'm sharing something internally, seeing all the comments like, oh, I didn't know this, or like, oh, I'm going to look at this art differently and things like that. It was really, really interesting for me. And just seeing, like, I think on that team, once again, everyone was like so intelligent, had a really strong art background, and the works they were able to commission was just so impressive. Like sometimes I would just walk around the different offices and I would see like these beautiful installations that will have that maybe go across multiple floors, or like they'll have like a mural, or they'll have like an installation or like a video work. And even though I was in New York, I was able to see what they had in different offices, and they had maybe motion work and more. And it just made me think about, once again, dynamism, like how things can be dynamic for like different environments and what that means. But it was a really, really good experience.
That's so interesting because, you know, now that I think about it, I mean, I think I've taken it for granted because, you know, I've worked at museums and I've worked in offices where art was always present.
Yeah.
And, you know, I've gotten the opportunity to know about these artists. And a lot of, you know, office buildings don't incorporate art into their space.
Yeah.
So the fact that Meta did, and, you know, these people had the opportunity to learn about these artists and see these beautiful installations, it's really incredible because I feel like art should always, you know, be seen, whether in somebody's home or an office or, you know, wherever, because as people, I feel like it's imperative for us to actually live with the arts.
Absolutely. And it's so enriching. Like so many people can get so many different things from the same piece of art. And I think working in that space made me realize it too. So, yeah.
So then after this, you mentioned that you went to Orange Barrel
Media.
Yeah. And you started at ISE-Da when you were already in Sotheby's. So it's been continuing through all of this.
Yeah.
So I feel like now we've come full circle.
Yes.
And I want to ask you, what sort of advice would you give to anybody who wants to work in the arts or follow a similar trajectory and open up their own kind of business?
I think you have to be honest with yourself. I always tell people, like, who I was before I started Sotheby's is not who I was when I entered Sotheby's. I really had to sit and be like, okay, you can be really lazy sometimes. You can be like really late with things sometimes. You can do this, that. And what I did is that I made a list of like, these are my strengths and these are my weaknesses. This is the type of, and then I made another list, like, this is the type of person I need to be if I want to reach these certain goals. And I also made a list. I love lists, by the way. And and so I said, okay, I have about a year to get it together and make sure I'm the person I need to be. So what can I do in terms of time management? If I have 5 minutes, what can I make happen in 5 minutes? And what can I do with little resources and little time? And making sure that I was just sharpening myself and my skills and my abilities in that time period from like when I had like got in and from when I was starting the program. So I think just being honest about yourself, also recognizing like the difficulty of building a business and how much hard work you think it's going to be times 10.
Yep.
Because I was like, oh, this is going to be so easy. I can do it. I can talk about art every day. It is so hard to like always do it. And you always have to be on in a really different way, but also make sure that you're putting in time for yourself to rest. Like, it's so important to not burn out. And I think especially working a 9 to 5 and having this, there are times that I feel like I'm about to reach burnout, but even structuring the business, we have 2 seasons a year. And we do that to make sure that I get a break and I'm not just always doing something. Like I'm going to have like a 2-month period where I'm literally just not thinking about ISE-Da right now. And I think that's something that's really important. I mean, being honest with yourself, being really open to failure. Like the fact that I tried to launch in 2018 and it just did not go well. It was just it was such a big fail. I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. I think being open to failure and recognizing that failure is not necessarily the end, is just like part of the story, and understanding that, to be honest, without failure, you're never just going to get better. And once you reshape your ideas, maybe any potential shame or grief that could come with failure, and use it as a learning opportunity, it would be so beneficial for you if you're someone that wants to be an entrepreneur, even just in life. Like, you're going to fail at things, and that's just honestly a given. The world didn't end. The world keeps spinning, and you will keep going. And I think making sure that you have that understanding is really key. Be prepared to have a lot of people telling you what to do with your business, and recognize that you need to keep the integrity of your vision for, if you want to be an entrepreneur, your business, or what your career trajectory is. Because people, no matter if they're well-meaning, how well-meaning they are, maybe sometimes they're not, they will always try and project their wants, their needs, maybe their fears, their insecurities onto you. And you've got to make sure that you're shielded against that, and making sure that, like, I know what it is that I want to do. This is what I want to achieve. Yeah, I may have these flaws, but these are my strengths, and this is how I know this is going to happen. And making sure that you're armed with that, and you always need to be armed with that. Because a lot of people, I think, have seen ISE-DA and say, oh, I want ISE-DA to be this. But no, that's not what ISE-DA is about. And I think especially because it is literally an advisory by Black people, for Black people, about Black art. I've had a lot of people to this day, 4 years in, and we have a very extensive website that explains what we do, that says, you should make it about people of color. And I'm like, that is not my mission, and that is not my purpose. And there are so many other institutional organizations that have that purpose. So why would you want to project that onto this? Because there are not many institutions or organizations that just focus on Black art, Black people, Black professionals. And I don't want to fall into the trap of pleasing everyone by just making it people of color, or just in general. And even when I was in Sotheby's, some of my colleagues and classmates would say, I'm not Black, I don't feel comfortable with this. Like, what if I'm a white person, I want to buy works by Black artists? And I was like, me making ISE-DA is not stopping me from doing any of that.
Exactly.
And I think being okay with the fact that some people are going to dislike what it is that you're doing, just making sure you're armed with all of this and you're prepared to deal with that. So making sure that you're centered, that you're grounded, you're protecting the integrity of your mission, things like that, and making sure that you're sticking to your plan is really important.
I think, you bring up incredible points and everything that you just said. And, I think when you look at things like when you try to make something that pleases everybody, what you end up doing at the end of the day is disappointing the most important person, which is yourself.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think you know exactly what you want to do and your mission. And a lot of people have to trust their gut more and their instincts rather than all the voices around them.
Yeah.
And I think you've done that incredibly well with ISE-DA.
Thank you. And I mean, that's not to say that people won't have valuable feedback, but I think it's important to filter out what is needed, and whatever, if it's not, just discard it and move on. And maybe it's needed for a future time, so maybe put it somewhere in the back of your mind, but it's not everything that you need to hear, and not everything that you need to implement or take note of.
Yeah, 100%. And also, touching on the topic of failure, I think it's incredibly important for everyone. And everyone will go through it, like you mentioned. And I mean, just from my own personal experience, I failed at so many things, but I know now I will never make those mistakes again. So it's an incredible learning experience for everybody, even if it's disheartening at that moment.
Yeah. I mean, I'll go back to my chemistry. Though I had no business trying to be a pre-med student. Like, I literally had no business trying to be a pre-med student because I did well in chemistry in high school. That doesn't mean anything. It does not mean that you're meant to be a doctor, right? So I sometimes think that failure either sharpens you and makes you stronger in that one direction, or helps redirect you. And sometimes that is needed. Like, there are so many things since that time that I failed at that I'm like, once again, I actually had no business doing that. Like, why did I think I should be doing that? That's not what I'm meant to be doing. So... And I always tell people, even like when looking at art, like, I think when things are negative, there's like a shame that people carry with them with any negativity. But I feel like negativity and positivity, it's just information, right? So, okay, I failed at this. That's just information for me. It's what I'm doing with that information that is like really important. So when I talk to like people who are part of our new collectors program, I don't like this art. Okay, why don't you like it? What about it that you don't like? And what does that tell you about things that you're looking at in the future? So I tell them it's important to know what you like about an artwork and why, but it's even more important for me to know especially what you don't like and why, because that helps narrow things down And I think that's like really important. So you're learning the good and you're learning the bad, and that helps narrow your focus consistently.
Yeah. It's
yeah.
actually interesting that you bring that up, because every time I look at it and I don't like something, I always ask myself why I don't
Yeah.
like it, and why it stirs that emotion in me. And then
Exactly.
when you really start digging in there, you realize that you might actually end up
To
liking
it.
what you don't
Exactly.
like.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, then and it just helps with the learning process,
Mhm.
especially if you're willing to investigate why things may elicit maybe a negative feeling or like like something that makes you uncomfortable. Like that's also a really important process instead of just chasing like, oh, I love this. This makes me feel good. This makes me feel like you should be investigating both. And I think that's really important in any process.
Yeah. And that's why a lot of, reasons why art is so impactful is because it's therapeutic in a lot of ways.
Mhm.
And that's, a way that you can actually discover yourself and
Yeah.
why the things that you feel when you see something are
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. Agreed.
So another important question that I want to ask you is, what were some of the challenges that you faced in your professional trajectory in the arts? Or were there any people that have really helped you through it?
Yeah, I'm very, very lucky to have had academic advisors, supervisors that have been so supportive of me. I think there are a lot of things that, like, especially as women, we can experience in the art world or any industry. But I think that I've been shielded from a lot of that because of those people. And I'm so thankful and grateful that they were able to see some sort of like light or potential in me and wanted to help cultivate that. So I've really, really enjoyed that. Um, some I'm sorry, can you repeat the question? I forgot about it.
It's okay. The question was like, what were some of the biggest challenges you faced as a
Challenges.
woman in the industry, or like some pivotal people who have helped you through them?
The team, once again, National Gallery, extremely pivotal. Linda Merrill, she was a person that even got me thinking about art history. Literally without her, I probably would have, no, I would have left chemistry for sure. But I would have just, I don't know what I've been doing. So
Yeah.
Some other pivotal people, Stephanie and Chris, who were my supervisors at Black and Veatch, to this day, very supportive, will call and check on me. And I really love that. Even to this day, will still write letters of recommendation for me. And it's been really helpful. And I think like some challenges, I think just building confidence, I think in an industry like the art world can be so hard. Like, and especially, to be transparent, I don't come from wealth. And I think trying to figure out like, how can I navigate this in a way that I'm doing the things that I want to do, but I'm also able to live the life that I want, can be so hard. Like when I was in Sotheby's, I had such a great time. It was such a formative period of my life, but I was in school part-time, working multiple part-time jobs. My commute was 2 hours each way. I was going to all of these openings and events. Like I was exhausted. So that's why when the lockdown happened, I was actually able to like breathe a bit, because I was at home, I was schooling from home, I was working from home, and I was able to kind of like recenter myself. So I think that I've had some challenges where I'm like, I really want to make this work. And sometimes I take on too many things because I'm like, I want to make sure this happens. I want to make sure I reach this level, but like maybe I don't have the resources I hope to have had and things like that. That's really helped. This has really been a challenge. Getting ISE-DA started was also a challenge because things like funding is really hard in the art world. So even the fact that we've been able to make it like revenue generating in like 4 years is really, really good, because that has helped with some funding issues and we've been able to get this much traction, etc. And even though, we have Forbes, we have like a lot of this support, we're getting increased press, it took us years, it took years to get there. And it was also just luck that we had the right people who were listening to us or like knew about what was happening. And there's some people that it maybe will take 2 months for that to happen. Some people take 10 years. So it just, for us, happened at this like 4-year mark, 3-4 year mark, which is really, really good. A challenge was definitely like refining the business, because we talked about like you have so many people saying that they want to do this, you should do this. And I think at the beginning of ISE-DA, I was taking a lot of that to heart because I really, really wanted it to be successful. But I felt that the more confident I got, and especially when the lockdown happened, I was able to really recenter. That really helped with like the confidence, like, no, this is actually what I want to do. And I was able to really focus and say, okay, I'm not listening to this. This is the trajectory. I can rework this business plan and things like that really helped. So I think a challenge is really like a personal one. I think that being an entrepreneur is really also a big personal endeavor that you really need to work on yourself to like build the confidence to do that, because you're going to have a lot of people talking down on you, because starting a business is not something that's easy and it's not something that everyone does. But you just got to keep going. Like if you really believe in it and it's something that you really want to do. And I think that was a real challenge. I think for me, like building the confidence to be like comfortable, even talking about ISE-Da, because the first year it was fine because it was online and we're posting content, but like I was still kind of quiet about it in person. But to like find my voice and like my confidence and saying, this is what I'm doing, this is why it's important, and advocating for it took me some time. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
And for sharing your entire story with us. So I think now is the time for us to head into the fire round of questions.
Love fire rounds.
You ready? Okay, so I have 10 questions.
Yes.
You can pick a number between 1 and 10, and then I'll read the corresponding question.
Okay. 9.
9. What do you always travel with? Which is perfect for you.
Yeah.
Because you travel so much.
I just had a funny answer in my head, but I'm trying to think. I always travel with, I'll say 2 things.
Okay.
One is, you know, when you have those little spray bottles that you can like put your perfume in, that's really helpful for me.
Okay.
So I have a series of those that I use for like perfume or things like that, because when I'm traveling, I'm typically, I'm always fitting in like an art event inside like a busy day. Like maybe I'm seeing family, I'm getting lunch, I want to go to this. I always need to make sure that I'm like refreshed. So I'm like, I literally have like a little travel bag of like toiletries that I have. So like a little perfume, a little this, little that, and just make sure that I can like put that in a small tote bag and carry that around with me. So I always make sure. Super
smart.
I always make sure I travel with that. Like even my handbag, I'm like, I always just have it, all these little things ready for me that I can just refresh.
Yeah.
Like, oh, my portable fan. If I'm going somewhere hot, which I have with me now, like once it hits summer, I break out my portable
Summer
fans.
in New York, come on. This is like...
In the subway, I have 2 portable fans with me all the time, especially in the subway, because if one dies, I will not be suffocating in the subway.
Yeah, no, it's awful. There's like no circulation. It's just hot air sticking to you.
Yeah.
And now that it's summer, I'm seeing more and more people have those like AC things
with
on their necks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And some of them have mists as well.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, we're really innovating. Like,
yeah,
every year.
Really. Every year, everyone's like stepping up their game. I'm just like, okay, I see you.
So a little bag of toiletries and a portable fan.
Okay. Yeah. Good tip. Okay, let's do 2 more.
Okay.
What's your choice?
4.
What is a passion project that you want to complete?
So I started taking Samba classes because I love carnival. You know, I think it's this really beautiful celebration and expression of just like happiness, excitement about life and joy. And I think especially in the Caribbean, it's really celebrating like the emancipation of like Black people from slavery. So I did Trinidad Carnival last year for my birthday. I'm doing Grenada. I'm actually flying out on Friday to go to Grenada for Carnival, and like even just seeing the regional differences. So Brazil's always been on my list, and I actually want to perform in Carnival for Brazil. So even in Trinidad and Grenada, like I've bought costumes and I've been like part of the mass bands on the road. But Brazil, I think, is like a different level because you need to learn samba and be like a samba dancer. So I started taking lessons, and I gave myself 3 to 5 years to be good so I can join a samba school and perform. So that's my mini passion project that I'm working on.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
The costumes for Carnival are like
beautiful
artworks. They're insane.
I love watching band launches and when the designers showcase their design for every carnival, like all the islands and all the different countries, because they are really artists. Like the things and the stories that they're even telling. Like one of the bands in Trinidad, they were talking about the flora and fauna in like Trinidad, and they were telling the story of that through the costumes, and it was so beautiful. And I was like, no, they're really artists. Like the things that they're able to do.
They're amazing.
Yeah.
Some of them I'm just like, I wonder if they were really heavy because they get so elaborate.
They're heavy.
They're heavy?
It was heavy. As soon as I crossed the stage, I actually took it off.
Okay.
I can't wear this the rest of the
So now I know.
They're
Every
heavy.
time I'm watching it, I'm like, I wonder if it's heavy or
Yeah,
not.
the bigger they are, the more heavier they are. So
Okay.
I now know I need smaller ones, and I can't do that again.
Okay. Nice. How often do you get to go for Carnival?
So last year was my first adult carnival in Trinidad. I want to see if I can do it once a year.
Okay.
It is expensive, so sometimes I'm like, oh, you know, I want to do two. Or like, let me do one, and I choose the one I want to do. But I want to just explore once again, like, what are the different local and regional stories they're telling about carnival? And, like, what does that mean for these different islands or different countries? So I don't know, maybe next year I'm considering like another smaller island, and then eventually Brazil. But it's just really interesting. It's once again about like culture, and how they're telling their different local cultural stories through their like costuming, but also the different programs that they have, maybe reenactments of like different events that have happened in their history and things like that.
Yeah, that's incredible. And it's so beautiful.
It's gorgeous. And I think one thing I do love about Carnival as well is that it's so many people of different ages, and it's just like this real true expression of freedom. Like I remember when we were on the road in Trinidad, and there was this one lady and she had like a broken leg, and her partner was pushing her still in the wheelchair, like dancing along. And it's just like, you see that, you see like older couples dancing, and they're like younger kids that always want to get the backpacks of the feathers from like the older people that played mass. So it's just this really beautiful community generational thing that happens. And I think it's just really, really wonderful and just like uplifting and almost like spiritual to like be in those settings. So I enjoy that.
Yeah. Well, I can't wait to see you go and watch it on your Instagram stories.
Thank you.
Okay, one more question.
Okay, one.
Name an artist you admire.
I really love Danielle McKinney. I think that what she's done with her practice is really beautiful. And I think it was at Miriam Bresky Gallery that she recently had a show like a couple of months ago. And it was done with like oil paint, and seeing how she's like still talking about like intimate lives of like Black women in these intimate settings, and is able to progress her practice and still tell that story. I really enjoy the fact that her paintings are small and intimate. And I think to be able to elicit emotion from people and have that impact on people with small artwork is a really phenomenal skill, because I think when an artwork's big and monumental, it's really easy to be taken aback, like, oh, it's so big. And it's a really easy way to have people engage with it and elicit certain feelings from it. But to do that on a small scale, I think it just shows you just have a mastery of your skill. And I think she only started like really painting like 4 years ago or something. It was recent. And I think for her to have the level of skill that she has, and for everyone to be enamored with her work. Like when I was at the gallery, I was kind of like trying to elbow people out of the way to see the artwork, and it was to stand in front of it and look at it. And people were just always really excited to see what she's doing now and what she's coming up with. So I really admire her work and what she's done with her career.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think it takes true mastery to make something small so incredible where you're just like, wow, I can't believe it.
Yeah, and you can't tear your eyes away from it. And I always tell people, like, I think, what about her work? Sometimes when I look at it, it might sound dramatic, but like I sometimes feel like sometimes you just want to cry. Like it's so beautiful.
Yeah.
And it's a portrait of a woman, but she makes you really feel like emotions. You feel the setting. It's what she's done with her paintings is really beautiful. Yeah.
I mean, that's the whole point of an artwork, is to elicit emotions.
Yeah.
Whether it's tears, happiness, disgust, sadness, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's the mark of a good artist and artwork.
Yeah. Great.
Well, thank you so much for being here,
thank you so
for
much
sharing your story. You're so smart, so driven,
Thank
and
you.
I cannot absolutely wait to see what you do with ISE-Da, and that we revisit this conversation like 15 years from now and where you are then. I can't wait to see it.
No, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Of course. And to all my viewers, thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you guys next week.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.